Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Healy, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Principals Association. Today, we wanted to spend a few minutes trying to answer two hot topic questions that we've been getting over the last week. One dealing with the new regulations around face coverings, and the second one dealing with 180 days and instructional hours. But before we jump into to those two topics, I want to take this opportunity to introduce to you our new Assistant Executive Director, Dr. Eric Eschbach, who's right here to my right. Dr. Eschbach comes to us very recently in the month of July and has just retired from the superintendency at Northern York County School District. So we're just thrilled to have Eric and his expertise on board with us, and he's jumped right in. Our plan is, as things unfold with COVID and other issues, it's maybe to come to you every single week just to give you some updates about any issues surrounding COVID or other things happening across the state and some short webinars. So this webinar is going to be recorded and then sent out to all of our members. So let's get started, Eric. We'll just do kind of like a back and forth. Let's hit the face covering issues first.
Yeah, absolutely. And having just come out of being a superintendent in a school district, it seems like just 2 months ago we were trying to decide how we were going to open school, and we were asking for direction, we were asking for guidance. And so now some guidance came, and we're just as frustrated, I think, about the guidance as I've heard from around the state. Let's just start with this. How has the face covering guidance changed just in the past week?
Yeah, we were thrown a little bit of a curve just recently. On July 1st, the Secretary of Health and also the Governor's Office put out that now across the state of Pennsylvania, that to go into any business, you must have face covering. The employees must have face covering, anybody visiting those businesses. So then right away, the question starts circulating. So what about schools? Because the initial guidance for schools was that face covering should be used as per CDC guidelines and social distancing up to 6 feet apart. But if you had less than that, make do with that if you could do that at that point. But certainly, use your best judgment with the face coverings. So we were trying to figure out, are schools affected by the new guidance? And then a couple days after that, as you know, Eric, we received guidance from the Department of Education that yes, that schools, all schools, charter schools, CDCs, public, non-public schools, everyone, this is a requirement for schools at this point in time, right? Because that could change in another week or so. But at this point in time, the guidance is that face coverings are required in our schools.
Yeah, and it kind of went from a guidance of may to a guidance of shall. So that mandatory term is really present there. So what type of face covering qualifies in this requirement?
Yeah, so everybody was thinking it was face mask initially, but they're using the term now face coverings. And that's a different distinction because the guidance that we saw, it could be anything. It could be homemade. Yeah. It could be purchased commercial face covering. So it's everything, although they do say that the face covering has to cover the nose and the mouth. And it has to adhere somehow to your head, either by straps over the ears or straps around your head. But it could be a face mask. It could be shields as well. So anything would count at that point.
I just am reminded about all of our students that we serve that have disabilities. And I wonder, how this requirement impacts students with disabilities. Are they going to have to wear the face coverings as well?
No, any student, that has a medical condition or a disability, or any student that would not be able to remove their own mask, things like that. There is a waiver for that, not a waiver, but they're exempt from that, I guess is the better word, from wearing the mask. Although, the staff members working with those individuals should take protective, caution in wearing their own face mask. And especially in the case of a medical condition, is having the proper face covering so that they're not getting any disease transmitted to them because of a medical condition.
Yeah. One of the challenges we have is trying to keep up to date with the requirements that are out there. And PDE said that health and safety plans have to be submitted.
Right.
So I know some schools have already submitted their health and safety plan. Now we're understanding that the face coverings need to be a part of that. So what if they've already submitted their plan?
Yeah, so the initial guidance about the health and safety plans was that if you're going to be starting up school, that each school district has to submit a health and safety plan. And there was different criteria, different sections that school districts had to make sure they included in the plan. One was the issue about social distancing and face coverings, mostly social distancing, getting that plan approved by their board and then submitted to PDE at this point. So now the new guidance says, if you've already done that, you need to update your plan to show these new regulations, meaning that face coverings are required in schools and that kids and staffs are going to have to use those. And the only time, the regulation says right now in the classroom, if kids are seated at desk and they're 6 feet apart, they could take their mask off. If they're outside and practicing social distancing at recess or whatever, or a physical education class outside, they could take their mask off. Going to be hard to do. I mean, we talked about, you and I as former superintendents, about just the 6 feet social distancing in the classroom, and can that even be attained with a classroom of 25 students in the physical space that we have?
Well, and you and I both served as elementary principals at one point in our lives, and I keep thinking back to the kindergartners and the first graders, and how a 5 or 6 year old who learns best through play and through doing, how we're going to be able to maintain our strong instructional programs in a social distanced world. That's going to be a challenge, for you principals.
Yeah, I totally agree. 5-year-olds are used to hugging everybody, so that's going to be tough.
Exactly. And you talked about going outside and on the playground, but what about the sports activities? I mean, right now it's July. We're getting ready for band camp to start up. We're getting ready for all the sports camps to start up. How do face coverings come to play in those outdoor activities?
Yeah, so it's the same for that. It's everyone must wear a face mask. So spectators must wear a face mask. And as you know, we have sporting events and activities both inside the school and outside the school. So social distancing come into play. What they're saying is for those athletes that are on the field, of course, they don't have to wear them during that time. But if they're on the sideline, for example, yes, they're supposed to have face masks unless they're social distancing 6 feet apart. Their coaches, the media people that would be filming, for example, if they're even allowed in, the school district allows them in. All of those people would have to have the face coverings as well.
I'm a fan of Premier League soccer from England, and I've been watching some of their games, and they actually do exactly what is being required with the players that sit on the bench wearing a face mask. And so it should be interesting to see what the fall sports schedule looks like.
Yeah. So I just want to, make this point, as you and I have been talking about every single day, about that's the guidance today.
Yes.
It could change as soon as we're done recording this webinar. So really stay tuned to the Pennsylvania Principals Association website, because as we get new guidance, we do upload that as well.
Yeah, and we just heard that the CDC will be updating their guidance next week. So we are trying to stay on top of this on a daily basis, and you should as well.
Yeah. So let's turn to the other hot topic issue that we've been dealt with this week, and that's that whole issue about the 180 days and the hours, because there seems to be a lot of confusion circling around that. So what we do know is that during the remainder of the 1920 school year, the 100 days of instruction was waived by the act, right?
Right.
So what are, Eric, the changes for 20 and 21 as we know them today?
Yeah, and as of today, literally July 9th, we know that the PDE issued some guidance based on a portion of the school code that was added in 1952. Now, I can't remember what the crisis was in 1952, But there's a piece of code there that says if there is an emergency, and it's an announced government issued emergency, that school districts have some flexibility with the number of days and hours. And so PDE has said that the governor has equated this COVID-19 pandemic to a qualifying emergency, and that school districts can adjust their calendar and adjust their schedules to have flexibility with the required hours and times.
Okay. So going forward, I know last year when we had to move to planned instruction, people were doing their best to make sure that kids got what they needed.
Right.
I think the requirements for 2021, as far as FAPE and Chapter 4, are going to be a little bit more intense to meet those standards.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether we are providing instruction in a remote environment, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's in some hybrid, we still have to meet the standards outlined in Chapter 4. And we still have to offer a free and appropriate public education. So the difference is in the spring, there was some flexibility on our parts as to how that might be able to be achieved. But in the fall, as you work with your teachers, as you work with the students that they serve, you're going to have to make sure that they're meeting the standards. We're not going to be able to offer instruction that is simply enrichment anymore. They have to meet the standards for that grade level, for that course, and your special ed students have to be offered a free and appropriate public education.
So Eric, you talked a little bit about flexibility in that program last year, and part of that flexibility was that many districts during the planned instruction, the remote learning portion, were not tracking attendance.
Right.
So does that requirement change coming up into the 2021 school year as well?
Yes, it absolutely changes. And the guidance that we're given from PDE says that attendance must be taken. That attendance, how we take that attendance is kind of, there's some flexibility with that. That's going to change depending on whether you have face-to-face learning, obviously, or if you have remote learning, but attendance must be taken during that time. So yes, that's going to be a challenge, especially for those school districts who have difficulty with accessibility and students being able to get online, students being able to log in and so forth, because that's how most school districts and our cyber charter colleagues, that's how they take into account attendance, is some type of a login or some type of the number of units completed.
Mm-hmm. So when we were talking about the face coverage, we alluded to that health and safety plan that has to be submitted with the new guidance for the face covering. So if a district wanted to enact some flexibility with 180 days and the hours, is that the same process for them?
Well, it's a little bit more intense than that. The regulations say that the school board must approve a resolution that addresses this emergency and addresses the fact that they will be changing their calendar, their time structures, and so forth. And that must be approved by a majority of the school board members. That health and safety plan then has to have an addendum to it that also includes information on this and the fact that the school board has taken those steps. And it has to be posted, and the Secretary of Education has to review that. I think the challenges and the questions that are coming up right now are 180 days versus the 999 / 900 hours. So current school code says you have to have students in attendance for 180 days. We have some flexibility with that with our Act 80
Right.
days. But there has to be 180 days accounted for. And there has to be, in conjunction with that 180 days, there has to be 990 instructional hours at the secondary schools and 900 hours at the elementary schools. what we assume that many people are assuming is that, okay, the 180th day in this emergency declaration still stays, but the 990, 900, we have some flexibility. We're not sure that that's true. Reading the regulation, we believe that you still have to get the 990 hours and at the secondary, 900 at the elementary, but you have flexibility as to how you get that. So it doesn't have to be butts in a seat to count as hours. It doesn't or as days. Online instruction can count as hours and can count as days. So we're going to get some more clarification on that and communicate that out with our members. We actually have a call into PDE for clarification on that because there's some confusion there.
So the tracking during the remote portion of that will be very critical now to make sure they have the hours as well as the days going forward for 2021.
Yeah, remember Act 13, which took place in the spring, waived the 180 days, waived the 990.
And that's over.
Yeah. That waiving is over. We have to account for days. We have to account for hours in some way, shape, or form. There's no waiving anymore. It's flexibility now. So we go from a model last spring of being given waivers to a model where we're being given flexibility.
Right. And also comes to the point that we've talked about before is that last year, because we were in a wait and see mode of getting to planned instruction and ramping up to that, going into the 2021 school year, we need not to have a pause button. Right. For example, we need to be able to be very flexible that if we have to move from face-to-face to remote, that we do that very, very quickly because of the 180th and because of the hour commitment as well.
Absolutely. And the next thing that'll be coming out for school districts to have to submit is educational plans of some form. And you're going to have to be able to flip a switch and move from remote to face-to-face to some type of a hybrid, perhaps. Right. We certainly hope that doesn't happen. We certainly hope that that things change here and we can have truly face-to-face instruction. But we know even with the face-to-face instruction that's going to happen, it's not going to be like it was before March 13th.
Right. So stay tuned for other updates as we get them. We'll certainly be posting them to our website. We encourage you to visit our website very often at paprinciples.org, where we will provide those updates. Our plan is every single week to do a new webinar and any issues that surface during that week and send it out to our members. So thanks for tuning in.
Hey, and if you have questions that you would like us to answer that we haven't answered, please email us. You'll find our email addresses on the website on paprinciples.org. So I'm excited to join the team and thanks for this opportunity, Paul.
Yeah, and I would just add to that as well. We know what a big lift this is for school leaders across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We recognize that and we totally appreciate that. You're probably not hearing that from your constituents right now or getting the pats on the back, but we really appreciate everything you've done since March 13th and will continue to do during the 2021 school year as we all wrestle with COVID-19 and all the issues surrounding that. So thank you so much for all you do.